Hello, everybody. I hope you guys are having a wonderful Wednesday. You guys are halfway through your school week. You have today, you have tomorrow, and then you have Flex Friday, and you hit the weekend. So I hope you guys are taking advantage of the time that you have and getting done with your schoolwork. Just know that our staff as a whole, our student ministry staff and myself are praying for you guys every day for this quarantine to end, for life to get back to normal, and for us to be together again. And so we look forward to that day and are planning for that day. But today's devotional is going to be over Matthew 8. So if you want to go ahead and grab your Bibles, that'd be awesome. What I really like about Matthew 8 is for the past 3 devotionals, we've been talking about Jesus on the Sermon on the Mount. He's been preaching a lot of good teaching. But now what we see is in verse 1, Jesus came down from the mountainside. And this is where he comes down from teaching and he starts to live out the life that he's been asking others to live. And I think we can learn a lot from Jesus' physical ministry. And so if you want to go ahead and flip there, start reading, that'd be awesome. So you can read Matthew 8. We won't read it all together, but you can pause the video now and we'll get started after that. So pause it now. Okay. So Matthew 8 is actually split up into 6 sections. And I'm going to kind of group a couple sections together because I think there's a big overall narrative that Matthew's trying to weave here in Matthew 8. And I think we can see it when we kind of slow down and see all the sections in this chapter together. So what we'll look at is these first 2. We have Jesus healing a man with leprosy, and we have Jesus healing a servant of a centurion. Now, both stories have something in common, which is Jesus healing, which I think is amazing within itself. But I think what we can really look at that is very practical to us is the approach and the posture of the 2 men in the stories. So if you look at this first story of this man with leprosy, what we need to realize is this man's probably only chance of being healed. There is no cure at that time in Israel. And so what usually happens to those with leprosy is once they have leprosy, it's highly contagious. So people exile them to like a leprosy village or compound. That's where they spend the rest of their lives. And so this man isn't just seeking like physical healing. There's going to be social healing. He can go back into the life that he used to have before he had leprosy. And there's probably some personal healing or emotional healing with family or people he hadn't been able to see because they've had to remove themselves from it. And so what I admire is that this is a critical moment in this man's life. But if you look at verse 2, he has a certain way that he asks Jesus for healing. He says, "Lord, if you are willing, you can make me clean." He has such a humble approach to asking Jesus for healing. And for me, I would not have been the same. I would have had a lot of pride. I would have told Jesus about how many videos I made during quarantine, how much prayer I've been doing, how many Zoom chats I had with students. I would have been building my case to say, God, look what I've done. And that's not the approach we need to have. The posture we need to have when we ask God for things, or Jesus for things, is humility. We don't need to go into it expecting God to move because we're good and we've done good things, but instead that we expect God to move because he can move. So we look at this next story about Jesus and we see that backed up by the centurion. The centurion knows, and I think he says it, let me see. All right. For I myself of a man under authority. Sorry, that took me a while to find. In verse 9. What he realizes is that Jesus has authority. He has power. He can do miracles. He can move mountains. He can, heal those with leprosy, heal those that are demon possessed. Like he can do those things. But also, it's not that just that this centurion has, knows that Jesus has authority. He has confidence that Jesus will do what he says he does. That's why he says, you don't even have to go to my house. I know it will be done. And what Jesus says in verse 10 is he says, truly I tell you, I've not found anyone in Israel with such great faith. And so do we have that confidence that Jesus has the power to do amazing things? And he can. And so then what we see is in this next section where my Bible says Jesus heals many, what we see is that Jesus is willing. Jesus wants to. Now, I know this always goes back, or for me, I remember when I was a student, a lot of times I didn't ask Jesus for things or pray to him, petition to him, because there was some fear of that. What if he doesn't move? What if he doesn't do what I ask for him? And for me, and now growing in my faith, what I need to realize is, one, Jesus will provide everything that we need. He doesn't necessarily provide everything that we want. But two, that he wants to be our provider. And regardless of our is our relationship with God built on, what he can do for us? So if he can provide this, then I'll keep believing. I'll keep, or is it built on something more solid that he is who he says he is? But two, that I need to realize that God wants to be that person. He wants to be the person we go to when we need something, when we have something that's really stirring in our hearts. Like Jesus wants to be that for us. So what we see in this next section is called the cost of following Jesus. It says, well, if you're going to be asking him to move in your life and be a part of your life, then what's the cost? And we see there's two. One is a man asked Jesus, I'll go wherever you go. And Jesus says, foxes have dens, birds have nests, but the Son of Man has no place to lay his head. Well, we can realize one cost of following Jesus is we need to be prepared to go wherever he calls us to go. We can't say, man, I'll follow you in Athens. No, instead we need to say, I'll follow you wherever you lead me to go. And the second part is this and to me, it always hit me. It's harsh. Verse 21, another disciple said, Lord, first let me go and bury my father. But Jesus told him, follow me and let the dead bury the dead. I was always like, man, Jesus, that's harsh. What we need to realize is that term, bury. What it really meant and what Jesus knew it meant was there are two phases to a Jewish burial. There's the first one that doesn't take long. You wrap the person in cloth, you put them in their tomb. And the next stage of the burial is a year later. And it's when you take the bones and you bury them. It's like two phases. And what this man was asking for is he was saying, Jesus, give me a year. And that's how long it was in between those stages. He said, give me a year and I'll follow you. And what Jesus is really looking for is an immediate surrender and sacrifice. We need to realize is we don't need to say, Jesus, I'll follow you when I've done everything that I want to do without you. Or when I've reached all my goals that I've set up in life, I'll follow you. What Jesus wants us to do is drop everything and follow him. And that's the cost. Is dropping what we might feel like is necessary and important and doing what Jesus calls us to do. Now, we enter into these last two sections. And I think what they both are, and you can see this theme, is that this is what Jesus can do. If we look at this first one, he calms the storm. I think there's a lot of symbolism, but also just a pure fact that Jesus, the storm's raging on, he's on a boat with fishermen, and they're freaking out. And so they understand how big and crazy this storm is and how life-changing it could be if they died on it. But Jesus just gets up, says stop, and the storm stops. And he gets all of them about their faith. But what we need to realize from the story is that Jesus can calm the storm, and he will calm the storm. And what we can gain if we give our life to Jesus and we plead to him and we ask him for things, but also when we start to live a life that follows him, what that shows us is that no matter what situation we go through, he can get us through it. And then we hit this last story. I think it's amazing. There's a lot of just elements to it, but the story of him healing the demon-possessed man, he puts the demons into pigs and they run off the side of a mountain and he gets kicked out of the village. He's kicked out of the village because for that village, those pigs, that was a lot of people's livelihood. And what Jesus did was he just bankrupted a lot of people and they don't want him there. But I think what they're seeing is they lost a lot of money, but what Jesus really did, and sometimes we lose the midst of it, two men were healed and their lives were changed. And so what's the cost? Cost of following Jesus. What do we gain? One, we can make it through any situation like the story above said, but in this story, what we realize is this. Jesus can change our lives. No matter how drastic it is, he can change our lives. And it's a change that is just miraculous, where he changes us from death to light spiritually, where our pursuits, our passions, our mindsets, everything is changed because of what Christ does on the cross. And so I hope you guys enjoyed that through Matthew 8. This was my 15th take. And so I made it the whole way through. So we're going to keep this one. But I hope you guys gained some stuff from Matthew 8. If you ever have any questions or anything that you find interesting from it, please comment or send me a text or DM the Instagram account or YouTube, page, whatever it is. Let us know that you're listening, you're watching. And I hope you guys got a lot out of this devotional just like I did. So I love you guys, and I will see you guys soon. Bye.